I just sort of found myself mid to late December just really having this moment of what am I doing? I'm working so hard. I'm feeling burnt out. And I had this very impactful moment with my children. I have a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old. And we were playing in our loft, which is also like the jungle of toys in my house on a Saturday morning. I heard my phone ding. And in that moment, I would like to tell your conscious investor listener that I didn't answer my phone, that I ignored it and was a good mom. And that is not what happened. I answered my phone. It was a client that needed me. And the room got eerily quiet as I looked down at my phone to answer this message. And I looked up and my daughter was giving me this very serious stare. And she said, "Mom, put down your phone." Ooh. Anyone who's a parent out there will understand that that is a moment that really sits with you, where you realize that you're telling your children by your actions that the most important thing in the room is the cell phone and not the people in front of us.
Jess, so thrilled to have you on the Conscious Investor podcast. Welcome.
Julie, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's good. This is going to be such a dynamic conversation because what you do is so interesting to me, and how you got there. I don't even know the whole story. And so I just can't even wait to dive into this conversation. But you know what? You and I are already acquainted, but the conscious investor doesn't know you quite yet. And so let's go ahead and start with the question of all questions. You know the question, conscious investor. Jess, what do you do and how on earth did you get started?
Thank you, Julie. Yes, I love this question because it's unexpected, definitely in my case, my story of how I got started. I like to say that I am a business strategist at heart, but my real passion is that I'm a motivational hiker. And a lot of people go, "What is that?" And I like to explain it this way. My sole mission right now in life is to encourage more people to get out in nature, get out outdoors, use movement as medicine, and harness the ability to unplug from technology. And what this all does is it really allows us as human beings and spiritual beings to tap into our true authentic self. And for a lot of us, that'll be the first time in many years. And so that's what I do. I wear a lot of different names and titles, but I also just teach business strategy from the trail. So I work with a lot of executive leaders, corporations. I do keynote speaking, and I'm just all about inspiring people about the magic there is to be found on a hiking trail.
Okay, there's so much magic to be found out on the hiking trail. I know I generally can't go a day. If I go 3 days without reading my Bible, if I go 3 days without being out on a trail in some capacity, and for me, we know conscious investor. I mean, like where I live, it's like my road is a trail, like I've got my meadow, I've got acreage and things like that. So that's to my advantage. I have to be outside. But how did you get started in this? I mean, you were a business strategist and like now you've made this massive pivot to this motivational hiker. Like how does these two don't even exist in the same space in most of our minds? So like, how did you make this transition?
Yes, you are so right. So I guess I would say the way I made the transition is the catalyst for me was burnout. I have experienced severe burnout. And I would say the ultimate problem is when you experience burnout, you get disconnected from yourself. It presents in problems such as feeling disconnected from those that are closest around you, whether it's your family, your coworkers, your friends. But that, I say, is just a symptom of the greater disease. And the greater disease is disconnection from self. And so after experiencing that multiple times throughout my life, most recently was this past December, I had left corporate America about 2 years ago to start my own consulting firm. And entrepreneurship's really hard. As you know, Julie.
Like not for the faint of heart
it is
at all.
Not for the faint of heart. And I just sort of found myself mid to late December just really having this moment of what am I doing? I'm working so hard. I'm feeling burnt out. And I had this very impactful moment with my children. I have a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old. and we were playing in our loft, which is also like the jungle of toys in my house on a Saturday morning. I heard my phone ding. And in that moment, I would like to tell your conscious investor listener that I didn't answer my phone, that I ignored it and was a good mom. And that is not what happened. I answered my phone. It was a client that needed me. And for any of you that are entrepreneurs yourself out there, you realize that you don't bring your work home with you. You live in your work. And I was responding to that in the moment instead of prioritizing time with the most precious humans in my life, which are my kiddos. And the room got eerily quiet as I looked down at my phone to answer this message. And I looked up, my daughter was giving me this very serious stare. And she said, "Mom, put down your phone." Ooh. Anyone who's a parent out there will understand that that is a moment that really sits with you, where you realize that you're telling your children by your actions that the most important thing in the room is the cell phone and not the people in front of us. And several days later, this bubbling up burnout feeling I was having, I decided to do what I always do when I reach this kind of point in my life. I decided to go for a hike. So I woke up at 5 a.m. here in Boise, Idaho, December 23rd. It was freezing cold out, Julie. The snow had just fallen. And I drove out to the Boise foothills and took myself on a hike. And as I got up to the top of the, mountain slash foothill, not really, tiny little mound, right? I sat and I watched the sun come up over these snow-capped mountains. And I started asking all of the questions we do when we reach this pivotal point in our life. Like, what am I doing wrong? This wasn't what I thought it would be. How do I fix it? And then I was like, well, maybe I'm asking the wrong question. Maybe what I should ask is, when was I the happiest, the healthiest, and the most fulfilled throughout my life? And I like to say that's when there was universal irony, because just as the sun is like peeking up over these snow-capped mountains, it's so beautiful. Like, it dawned on me, yeah, Jess, the times when you were the happiest, the healthiest, and the most fulfilled is when you were making time to hike daily. And I realized in that moment I had let that daily practice go, just in being a mom and a busy entrepreneur. And so I decided, climbing kind of back down that mountain that day, that I was going to challenge myself to hike for 31 days in January. In Boise, Idaho.
January. Yes.
What was I thinking? But I did it. And on the other side of that incredible, very difficult month for me was the epiphany that I was so unhappy because I was not showing up authentically in my work. And I needed to incorporate my passion for nature and the outdoors and my love of hiking in my work. And that's what led me to being a business strategist that takes people hiking. So here I am.
Okay, there's so much there, because I know I don't know an adult who can't relate to burnout in some facet of their life.
Sure.
And what we're talking about really has to do with being congruent and our internal worlds being at peace with each other, because they're acting in harmony, they're synergetic, and they're just like, okay, we're all flowing, we're good. But when we have these moments where we're no longer congruent and we're starting to war within ourselves, and we're trying to push through on something big, but it's not completely aligned because we are sacrificing what brings us life and joy, it just implodes. It's massive. I was just talking with a coaching client about this recently, and it's so massive. I'm wondering, I have so many questions about this. When you were working in the corporate space, you have other people around you sharing the workload and check-in points and things like that, right? I mean, when we're working in community with other people versus working for ourselves, it's different. It's very different than being an entrepreneur, especially a solopreneur, like setting out on your own venture. What was that? Were you able to go out and hike more when you were working in that corporate atmosphere by way of the structure and just the ease of knowing how to do it? And then was that waylaid because you were learning how to and starting a firm of your own?
So that's a really interesting question. No one has ever asked me that. So as I think back, it's actually a bit of a reversal, Julie, in that I had a very demanding role in corporate America. I was a global account director for a large sustainable flooring company, and my clients were the largest companies in the world, Fortune 10 clients. And so I actually found myself working very long, grueling hours, sometimes, 5 a.m. Teams calls because I managed a global team, all the way up to sometimes being on the call, on the phone with Asia, 11 p.m. at night. And so at the height of COVID, actually, I lived in Portland, Oregon, and that is famous for having Forest Park, which is the largest urban park in the United States. And I think a couple months into COVID, I realized that I was just kind of had blinders on for my work and getting the job done. And my office actually overlooked Forest Park. And I remember one day just having this burnout moment, Julie, where I realized I wasn't taking care of myself. I was being a total workaholic. And I looked out my window as I was waiting for my next Zoom call, and I saw Forest Park, kind of like an old friend, like, oh, I miss you. And that day I canceled an internal meeting and went for a hike. And that started a whole new way of me showing up. So what led me to that epiphany on the Boise foothills was I had practiced this at the height of COVID, working my corporate career to get me back in a good headspace. And so I would say, to your question, I hiked a lot less when I was in corporate America. And but whenever I found a way to include that in my life became better. My work became better. I was a happier human being for everyone around me. And so my mission in sort of setting out in my own company was always to find that person again and show up as her in my life and my work. It just, as it sometimes does in entrepreneurship, I bumbled about a bit until I found her again. What I didn't realize is she was always on a hiking trail. I don't know if that makes sense or answers your question, but when I did find myself again, by including hiking in my business practice and what I do every day, I'm intentional about my business. My everyday workday includes hiking daily. I hike with my clients. I hike with my executive coaching clients. I hike with my entrepreneur clients. I do keynote engagements where we break it in half and I hike with a group. So I'm making sure that I'm remaining happy and fulfilled in what I do as well.
This is so imperative. And so what I'm hearing, this is really fascinating. You're in corporate America, you're facing the burnout that you faced not too long ago also, as you were in your entrepreneur early days. But because you're in that burnout, you look out to the park and you're like, it's calling you. And it's drawing you, because it's really interesting how that works. Our internal world is trying to find that connection and it's pulling us. And most of the time we're just like, I got to answer this call. I got to get in the meeting, and we shut down and we just put the blinders on, but you didn't, and you received it. You go out there, you go for this walk in this beautiful park. And really that sounds like the precipice of everything, like the beginning of, oh, we're going to go another direction. Like it's a catalyst, a little seed.
For sure. I do feel like the universe has been trying to send me signs for years. And only now I look back and go, oh, I don't know if you've experienced this in your life, Julie, but sometimes we're very stubborn humans and we need to get the message in difficult ways before we really pay attention. Unfortunately, I didn't pay attention at the easy ways. I waited until pretty massive burnout to get my attention.
Okay. Conscious investor, just be honest. We all know exactly, we're high performers. We know exactly what Jess is talking about. And I always encourage people to I like to just like listen to the quiet voice of God. Just listen. Like you don't want to hear I don't want to have to learn things the hard way anymore. I generally didn't like to either, but sometimes I missed the mark. So can you share with us a couple of the things that you can look back on now that if you would have listened then, you would have been in a better spot and avoided that burnout?
For sure. So, I'm thinking back to my days, when I was working in corporate America. And by no means, I actually think working corporate America is a wonderful thing. And you have the ability to change lives and impact a lot of individuals. And so I think if I look back, where I started to slide, Julie, and I think where a lot of us do in our
Free
professions,
slopes.
who we work for, is that we stop taking care of ourselves as some sort of virtue signaling that we can work harder, work stronger, be tougher. And if I look back now, for me, it really started postpartum with my daughter, my first child, and COVID happening. I kept putting all of my needs as a woman on the back burner, the need to exercise, the need to eat healthy, the need to get, I don't know, I probably need closer to 8 or 9 hours of sleep a night, the need to unplug from technology. I was ignoring all of that because I'm a high achiever and I am a workaholic, and that is my default. And so it makes me feel good to be that way, but at my own detriment. So I think those were a lot of warning signs that happened along the way of me just not paying attention to very simple human basic self-care needs. And then it eventually led to this sort of big burnout episode.
Okay. Again, conscious investor, I think we can all relate to times where we have set the exercise aside, the nutrition aside, rest, meaning getting our hours of sleep and actually having that rest away from the dings of the little computers in our pockets that are everywhere around us. Like, this is so relatable. Now, I was so blessed to meet you in person. And that's, what I'm like, I have to have you on the show. And unfortunately, I didn't get to go on the full urban adventure, urban exploration, urban hike. And that's, that was an adventure in and of itself. And I'm grateful for that. But I'm excited because you and I are going to be going hiking here in just a few days when I'm down in the Boise area. And so I'm curious, what does this look like? Let's just say, conscious investor and I are both curious, like, okay, we're going to go on this hike. Maybe we're inviting you, in to speak. Maybe I have you coming up to my growth summit to speak or something, like, and you're leading a hike. Like, what does this look like? And what's the goal, the purpose, the thinking? I just want you to take us down the rabbit hole.
Sure. Okay. So as we go down the first rabbit hole, I just want to warn everybody, there's 2 rabbit holes. Let's start with the first one. And that is you as it's a human being and as a person. I created what I like to call, it's the Hike 31 Challenge, and it is a replica of what I did back in January. So this is the first rabbit hole, and this is the most important. And it's all about creating a sacred date with yourself every day for at least 30 minutes a day where you spend time. And I use the acronym of HIKE so you can remember. So H stands for hike or walk. I stands for in nature. K stands for keep tech off. And I'm even talking about your smartwatches. Anything that might ding or distract you is going to interrupt the flow of you getting into this really beautiful state that I'll talk about in a second. And then E stands for every day. You're going to practice this every day for 31 days. And so what I found when I started doing this back in January, about a week and a half in, Julie, I started seeing benefits. I was sleeping more soundly. I was making better decisions. It was a lot easier for me to disconnect from my cell phone when I was at home with my family because I was already practicing that on the hiking trail. And so I started to realize these benefits. And in about 2 weeks in, I was like, okay, let me look up the science. I'm very data driven. So I'm like, there's research. Like, I'm not alone. And what I realized in doing a lot of this research is that this phenomenon of not just spending time in nature, but also spending time in movement has been widely studied. And what the studies say is that 10 minutes or more in nature is going to drastically reduce your stress and anxiety. So if you're in the middle of your workday and you're feeling super stressed about whatever, everybody can find 10 minutes. Go out and be in nature. 20 minutes or more is going to enhance your emotional feelings of well-being. This is really important. But what I'm most focused on is that 30 minutes or more mark. There's a shift in your cognitive function. And that is your brain's ability to process information, remember information, come up with creative ideas, and make more sound decisions. So one of the biggest benefits I saw back in January is that I started thinking differently about my business. My time on the trail was like a gigantic brainstorming session. And I would come back and be like, whoa, I have some really great ideas. And instead of feeling like those were too crazy, no one would go for it, because I was in nature, I was in movement, I was unplugged from tech, so I wasn't able to quickly be distracted, those ideas were given a chance to breathe. And then I would come back to my office and I would actually put them in practice. And it's been so widely like accepted and appreciated. So that's the first part of the rabbit hole, is practicing alone time in movement, in nature, unplugged from tech daily. You will become a better human being. You will become in touch with yourself again, and you're going to let your brain just wander and go wild. And it's really, it's a beautiful process, not only to experience, but now I encourage all my clients to do it as well. And what I love is I wake up first thing in the morning and I have voice memos from my clients saying, these are my thoughts from my early morning hike. And it's just a different process. So that's the first part of the rabbit hole.
Okay, I absolutely love this. It's really interesting. I don't know that most people actually set aside 30 minutes in any day for themselves to begin with. And so maybe, okay, I'm going to the gym to get my exercise in, or I'm going, and it's around other people, other energy that is going to interfere with like just having that stillness and that internal rest. It's powerful just having time to exist. My family knows that if they walk in, I wake up early, have time alone, and it's intentional time alone. I read my Bible, I journal, I read books, I just get to explore. Don't mess with me in that time. I will not be happy with you because I pay the price. I wake up early to do that. And then I'll go for a walk or something or do some exercise. But that practice of even finding solitude, but I love, the science behind the movement. We are designed for movement. We're not designed to be sedentary, which is, what they say, that's the new cigarette, is sitting, being sedentary. So, but okay, so we have the first part, which I love, also starts with us. And change in the world always starts with one person making a choice for their own life and enacting that and having it change them from the inside out. What's the second part of the rabbit hole?
Yes. So the second part of the rabbit hole is how I engage with clients. So I have executive coaching clients. I have entrepreneurial strategy clients where I help them build their business and work on their business strategy. And then, as I mentioned, I do keynotes, leadership retreats, and different things like that. So the second part of the rabbit hole is, okay, obviously first you want to take care of you, right? Put the oxygen mask on you first, and that's practicing that daily hike with just yourself. P.S. I have a lot of people tell me, Julie, I just wanted to mention this, my very high achievers, executives are like, I do that. I totally do that. And I listen to my podcast. And I was like, so you're not doing it, because unplugged is one of the things.
Right. No, you're listening. I will say I have been ditching my phone and tech, and I think it was a subconscious thing. And now that we're talking, I think I started doing that after we met in Dallas, intentionally leaving my phone behind. So thank you for that.
Quick pivot. I will get to the second part of the rabbit hole, but I'm super curious, since you're practicing it now.
Right.
What you noticed now that you've ditched the tech on your me time in nature?
It's beautiful. So I would oftentimes be walking, and or jogging, doing whatever exercise I chose. Right. And I'd have the earbuds in and I'd be doing my thing. Leaving it behind just it creates this white space.
Right.
In this space where I don't have any pressure. I don't have to learn. My brain doesn't have to be, basically there aren't any have tos. It's just be, enjoy. And I live in a postcard. So and I always enjoy it, but I enjoy it even more, right? Because I'm not distracted by it. And the thoughts are beautiful.
I love it. Absolutely. So just to answer your question about the second part of the rabbit hole, is what I do with my clients is I take them, no matter what my engagement is. If I'm working with coaching clients, for example, it always starts with a guided hike, now that I've started including this. And what I've found, since I've done it both ways now, Julie, I've helped people create their business strategies just in an office space, or create a business strategy starting with a guided hike. Each and every time I am shocked when I take a new client out on the trail, because we spend, obviously the minimum is 30 minutes. I like to keep them out on the trail for about an hour, so that not only have we achieved all those tiers I mentioned, the 10 minutes, the 20 minutes, the 30 minutes, but then we spend another full 30 minutes just in that flow state of that increased cognitive function. So I have a set group of questions as a business strategist that I ask a person out on a trail. And it could be around their professional strategy, their life goals, or the business that they're building. And so when I do that, Julie, I get very different answers on the hiking trail than I would in the office.
Oh, yeah, and I can imagine.
The answers are way more authentic to that individual. I get to the core of what's driving them and their fulfillment. And so by the time we actually make it into my office to then work on their mission statement and what they're going to do in their business and how they're going to achieve it, we are in a whole different realm. It's incredible. So I've done it both ways. I've actually experienced it both ways with one individual. And on the first day, it was just raining. It was like raining, downpouring like cats and dogs here in Boise. And so we both were standing at the front of my office, looking outside like this. And he's an avid hiker himself. And we were like, yeah, no, that's not fun for anybody. But it was his first VIP day with me. So we spent about 6 hours in my office working on his strategy. And it was fine. We had some good ideas, but it was 6 hours stuck in an office room. So I said to him, look, I'm going to make this up to you. We are going to go hiking next week, and then we'll finish up this strategy. The next week when we went hiking on a beautiful morning, we spent about an hour on a trail. We got into my office. Not only did we finish his business strategy in under an hour and a half, we also developed his intellectual property that he's had all of these incredible ideas. And he's actually, he's a doctor and he has a background in finance as well. He's a brilliant individual. I'm lucky to be working with him. But we were able to develop his intellectual property between the two of us together because we had spent time on the hiking trail and we were in that flow state of cognitive function. And it was just so fun. It was fun to experience that with him. And it was further validation that I'm on to something with what I'm doing.
This is so powerful. And I cannot agree with you more about authenticity. And it's really interesting when you meet people and you're doing an activity versus you meet somebody and you're, at a welcome reception or something of that nature, right? It's people, we try not to have our masks on. We're trying to not play any games or whatever. We could be the most authentic person, but the environment sets a stage that we are not in control of. And what's interesting is that when we're out in nature sets the stage and sets the tone, whether it be rain or mud or sunshine or wildflowers or mosquitoes, right? Nature is going to be setting the stage. I look out to my mountains that I'm surrounded by, and I am always just in awe of how grand things are. And I get to do my little tiny bit of contribution, in a lifetime. How cool is that? It has an interesting stage. And it's almost like people will go. My husband went to Scotland and it's like an intensive earlier this year. And so it's interesting that this hike experience seems like a mini intensive, really accelerating the internal process.
And so one of the challenges I found, so thinking back to that morning, December 23rd on that Boise foothill, is when I first started thinking this idea, Julie, of I want to go hiking daily. So when, warning for everybody, if you are in the middle of nature and you're unplugged, ideas will come up and they will be really cool. But at first, and I don't know if you've ever read Bill Bryson's A Walk in the Woods, his journey through the Appalachian Trail, or Cheryl Strayed's A Wild from Lost and Found on the Pacific Crest Trail. So as I'm sitting, my butt covered in snow on this foothill, I'm like, oh, that's what I need. I need a backpacking trip for 3 months to find myself in the wilderness. It'll be great. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I'm a mom to 2 toddlers. I'm building a business. My husband would kill me if I ran off into the middle of the woods. And also I don't want to leave my family. I have people that depend on me. And so my thought process in developing the Hike 31 challenge was, how do I do this and fit it into my lifestyle? By the way, if I go backpacking for 3 months, that's amazing. But how do I develop a daily practice that is sustainable long-term? What I didn't know, Julie, is simply by doing that, I was also creating a method that is widely applicable to everybody.
Right.
Most of us can't run off into the woods for 3 months.
Yes.
That's not our life right now. But how do we give ourselves a sliver of that every day?
And it's almost more powerful to have a sliver of it every single day. I mean, the big things are special, and trust me, through hiking is on my bucket list. So like
Yeah.
it's on, maybe we'll end up through hiking together at some point when, kids are grown
But
up.
the kids are grown. Let's do it. Like you and I, backpacks, the whole, that would be fun.
Just put me out in the wilderness for a while. That'll be fun. I like the critters, and it's just such a simple way of life, right? But to be able to put that into practice on a daily basis, what are some of the results that you've seen with, okay, two questions, because I don't want, sorry, I'm going to interrupt my self-conscious investor, because I know I am frustrated with myself that sometimes I will be out and I won't have tech. And I'll be like, that was such a good idea. I hope I don't forget that one. So what do we do about all of the ideas and we don't have devices to leave voice memos to ourselves or anything? Like, what's the practice there?
So 2 thoughts on that. The first thought is, and I am a widely forgetful individual. Like I don't even remember what I had like for lunch yesterday. So, however, what I've found is that when I'm on a hiking trail and I'm in my flow state, those ideas don't disappear for me. I do tend to always remind them when I come back and then jot them down when I get back into my office. However, because I've identified, just as you have, Julie, like this could be a problem and people would be tempted to kind of whip out their phone and leave a voice memo, I recommend carrying a field journal. And this was a recommendation by a dear friend of mine that he practices. Take a little field journal and a mini pencil, put it in your pocket. The end. Like you don't have to
so
write
easy.
Down, it's so easy. You don't have to write down the whole idea. Just write down the tidbits that will remind you of what the idea is. So now if you start an engagement with me, you kind of get this hike to become swag, which includes your water bottle and your field guide, to make sure. I encourage all my clients that sign with me that they practice Hike 31, and I explain that it will just benefit their business or their professional strategy. And they show up to our coaching sessions with their field journal, and I love it. So.
Okay, that's such an easy solution. Again, we can make things more complicated than they need to be. And those field journals, you'd even get the waterproof ones in case you live in a, rainy, quiet climate. Okay, this makes a lot of sense. The other question that I did have was, what are some of the results that you've noticed? You've been doing this now for some time. So what are some of the results you're noticing with your clients?
So my clients are reporting this immense clarity. So a lot of times, I think no matter who we are and what we do, whether we work for corporate America or have our own business, it's sort of like we're going throughout every day on some level of what I like to call autopilot or survival mode. Mm-hmm. And I don't care who you are or what you do, we're all at some percentage or level of that. And when we do that, we start to forget a couple of things. And the 3 things are who we are, why we're here, what are we going to do about it? Mm-hmm. And so I think the biggest gift that this spending time in nature, in movement, unplugged is giving not just myself, but all of my clients and the people I work with is clarity on those 3 questions. Mm-hmm. By spending time not being distracted and just with yourself, you will start to remember who you are. You haven't lost that person. We've just forgotten in that autopilot or survival mode. 2, you're going to start to ideate. A lot of us, what's the big question in life, Julie? Like, what's my purpose? What am I here to do? By spending this time on the trail, you're going to start to ideate what that is, right? For me, It's empowering people to get out in nature and find themselves again. And then the third thing, and I think the most fun thing I'm starting to see for my clients now that they've been practicing for longer periods of time, is how to execute on that idea. Okay, if I'm finding myself again, thinking through what my purpose is, how do I then show up as that person in my life and my work?
Gosh, I love this. It's really interesting. I'm going through, I feel like I'm slowly emerging from a chrysalis, right? Of going through a metamorphosis, and we're doing this on a regular basis. And sometimes we can try to I have to go back to this past version of myself and I have to be that. It's like, no, I need to be this version of myself, which still has the DNA and the facets of that person. But to be able to have this as a regular practice really allows us to be congruent with ourselves even as we are changing, because we should be evolving, right? So it's like we're going through this change process, and then we could have that consistent clarity and maintain that internal congruence as to this is who I am. And even if I've iterated and I'm slightly different, I'm still the same person. And so I don't have to war within, I can enjoy.
Absolutely. I think it's so incredibly, first off, brave of you and also humble of you to admit the universal truth that I think a lot of people at our age, forget, is that we are constantly evolving, and we should be. We should be constantly learning. We should be constantly challenging ourselves. And you've identified it so succinctly, so thank you, is that this is a lifelong practice. This shouldn't be, I don't tell the people this on the on-ramp, right? But this shouldn't be a 31-day practice. My hope is, it takes about 3 weeks to form a habit. My hope is that once you practice for a month, you're hooked. And if we continue to dedicate that time to ourselves and practice is sort of the way I've laid out, you will continue to just be in touch with yourself as you're evolving again and again and again. And you identified it. It's uncomfortable at times. I recently did a post, last week I spent some time in Grand Teton National Park. It was a bucket list item, hiking around, and I had a solo hike, Julie, where I have to practice what I preach, obviously, right? And so I did this solo hike first thing in the morning. It was pretty remote. It wasn't even in the park. It was on the west side of the Tetons. And I'm hiking along, and I'm like, man, this is uncomfortable. Here I am with my thoughts. And then, right, you're a busy working mom yourself, building your business and your brand, and then the Rolodex of all the things I need to do start. And I'm like, no, not place. And you have to power through it on the trail to get to that other side of the 30 minutes of feeling those different metrics and logs. And once about the probably 45-minute mark, I got to the top of the trail, which was this beautiful view of the west side of the Tetons. And I was like, yeah, this is pretty magnificent. And while I struggled kind of on my way up, both mentally and physically, thinking through all these things and just kind of getting a bit critical of myself, because listen, I'm learning and changing too. When I noticed this difference, when I came down the trail, I was about 45 minutes in on my hike, unplugged. I started to feel strong, started to feel capable. I started to get some really cool ideas for some of these upcoming leadership retreats and just keynotes that I have going on. I had a client that was dealing with a particular issue, and I had some cool ideas for him on how to solve or fix it. And I just felt in my total flow state. I felt incredible. And I was like, okay, so just remember to remind everyone, there's this it's not like you go out in the middle of the woods with your backpack and you're like, this is going to be amazing. There's an uncomfortable part of sitting alone with your thoughts. You got to get past it.
I think that's part of the process. So I think that might be one of the most critical parts of the process is that level of self-awareness and self-acceptance. Okay, well, this is just where I'm at. This is where I am. And that's okay. I did recently, I'm trying to think if it was right before or right after. It was right after you and I met. We ended up camping in Glacier National Park. We had planned that in January. I did a solo bike ride up going to the Sun Road, to the Continental Divide. And usually there are tons of people there. And I'm like, whatever. I just know I knew I needed to do it within myself. And I knew it was going to be uncomfortable. And getting out there, and there are grizzlies, and usually we see at least one bear. And usually, and I don't mind all my forest friends. They're my friends. But, it was that awareness of, oh, I'm alone and it's dawn and this is when everybody's active and there is nobody else out here. I didn't see anyone for an hour and a half. And I think I passed a total of 50 people because I started early. I summited early, and it was just, which was yay for me. But that mental practice of being comfortable in the discomfort, and just even learning how to be there for myself and how to comfort myself and say it's okay. You're okay. And our imaginations are fantastic and all of the ideas are fantastic. But we can't run away with them. So let's match this to experience. Let's match this to the present moment. Let's, But when we practice that out there, where we kind of feel like it's a survival type mode, and then we bring it into our business mode, into our family, into every part of our life. It's like, oh, well, let me see if this matches my imagination, and all of the fears that I'm creating are construct of my mind. So is this actually real? Oh, wait, I don't need to be afraid of that. I can push through and try this crazy cool thing for my company. It applies so many areas. I love this.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the grizzlies too, because I think spending time in the Grand Teton National Park was, I think, the first time I've gone solo hiking in grizzly territory. And I had a lot of the similar thoughts you just mentioned of like, had my bear spray, right? And was educated on what to do should I come across, a bear. But yeah, it was interesting for me to sit with that like fear and anxiety for the first couple of, I don't know, minutes on the trail, and then just taking a deep breath and being like, I'm not going to let this stop me from experiencing the beauty that is and the alone time that is. But in the same token, being fearless is one of the concepts I teach, and it's a concept in my upcoming book. I also want to remind people that being fearless is not about being reckless, right? Being fearless doesn't mean you make really ridiculous decisions. You still trust your gut, but being fearless means you shouldn't stop living the life you ultimately want to live because fear is getting in the way.
There's no place for fear. There isn't. Gosh, Jess, this is so good. I love your work. I love what you're doing. And I love that you're writing a book on this, because we know that when we write a book, we can get it into the hands of more people, and at least they can implement it even in the privacy of their own, headspace and heart space. Can we look forward to this book? Do you have any plans? Are you talking about the book publicly? Like, tell me, what do you want to say? What can we know about the book at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you are the first person, Julie, that I'm happy to talk publicly with about the book. So the title is pending some creative process. The working title is Hike to Become, which is the name of my brand, and it's the basis of my story. And it's the idea that when I was up on that mountaintop, in Boise, early in the morning, something that I really haven't shared yet is when I started to walk down that side of the mountain, and I was super pumped, Julie. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to hike for 31 days straight. It's going to be incredible. I slipped and fell in the mud, like not once, but twice. And I bit it. It wasn't like, ooh, slip. No, it was like I tumbled in the mud and the snow. And it's, 20 some degrees out. And I'm like, oh God, what am I doing? I don't belong hiking. I started to have all these limiting beliefs happen in my head. And I thought I'm not in the best shape of my life. I can't remember last time I was on a really epic hike. Who am I to be inspiring people hiking? And so all these limiting beliefs came up in my head, and it tried to stop me from doing what was essentially my greatest journey. Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, something changed. And I strongly believe it was because I was accidentally practicing the method that I now teach, being in nature, being in movement, and unplugging from tech. When those limiting beliefs crept in, Julie, and telling me all the reasons I shouldn't do it, when I picked myself up and I got back in movement down that trail, I thought, no, those are all the reasons why I should do it, because most people are just like me. Most people have a busy lifestyle. They're trying to manage burnout. They're trying to find their authenticity again. Most people aren't at the peak of their physical fitness. But what if I decided that I was going to hike to become the person I want to be? Why can't we all just hike to become, or do whatever it is we choose to become the person we ultimately want to be? We don't have to wait for perfection to be that person. And so the concept behind my book is really that, is it's a lot about my story, of course, and the burnout I've experienced throughout my life, as well as just the big epiphany and realization is that we don't have to wait. We can just show up every day, one mud-covered step at a time, to be the person we ultimately want to be. And so I'm really excited There's no date planned yet, but I'm actively working on the book, and the stories are coming, filled with adventure stories, as well as the lessons that nature can teach us, and how do we apply lessons such as being fearless from the trail to the boardroom, as I say, or in our business.
Into writing a book. I know as I was riding up to the Continental Divide, I literally had just gotten back from that event we met at, and I'm thinking about writing books and the process, and really solidifying and taking the entire uphill ride and connecting the struggle and there's the middle spot where you get bored and you just like, you want to disconnect. And I'm like, okay, well, it's beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but I'm like, I'm in the rhythm. You can kind of just find yourself a little bit bored, which is not normal for me. And I wouldn't say, when I say bored, it's not the average. It's not a normal board. Let me just clarify that. My brain is still firing and lots of excitement taking place. But it's interesting that whatever practice we have, that physical movement directly correlates to the challenges that we're going to face along the way. Slipping and falling after making a commitment reminds me of The Alchemist. I love Paulo Coelho's book. It's so good. And it's like, we're always going to be tested. We're going to be tried. As we slip, we fall. Gee, are you really going to get back up? Are you really going to do this? Are you really committed to this? And whatever it is that we choose to pursue, we're going to face that resistance in our life. So I love this. Jess, I just want to keep talking. I'm excited because you and I get to hang out and go for a hike this weekend. And I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm also wondering, the conscious investor is definitely, I know this is resonating with you because we talk about our physical well-being and how it correlates to our mental well-being, and how the output looks from there. They want to connect up with you. I know it. So what are the best ways to get in touch with you, to learn more about Hike 31 Challenge, to learn more and be in touch with the book coming up, all of it?
Amazing. Yeah. So the best way to get in touch with me is probably connect with me on LinkedIn directly. However, if any of your listeners are interested in joining the Hike 31 Challenge, it has become a bit of a trending hashtag on several social media platforms right now. You can text Hike, HIKE, to 33777. And through that process, you will get a one-pager on how to practice the Hike 31 Challenge. I will then sign you up to the private Facebook group, as well as you'll get on my email list and be some of the first people to know when my book launches. Those would be the best ways to get in touch with me.
I love it. And LinkedIn, we know Conscious Investor. It's a super fun social media platform. That number again to text Hike to 33777. Okay. Awesome. Conscious Investor, don't hesitate. You want to make sure that you go connect up with Jess over on LinkedIn. Text Hike to 33777. And that's going to give you that access to just having basically the cheat sheet. We all need it. I don't use my bandwidth mentally to remember all of these things. That's why we do these little textings. We get the little cheat sheet on our computer in our pocket and we can reference it. And then we can put it away and go for our hike. So you want to make sure you do that. And then you're also going to be able to stay in touch with, hey, the book's coming out, and you want to spread this. So do Jess a huge favor. If this was supportive to you, if this was interesting, if it was insightful to you, it is free to pass this along to someone else. This is an amazing message. It's an amazing technique that changes and transforms lives. It starts with you. Start with Jess. It's spread to other people. It's a practice I have in my own capacity. I'm going to have to enhance it. I'm going to have to text Hike and get the cheat sheet. But I want to just ensure, the Conscious Investor, that you take a moment, think about someone who would benefit from this, someone who might be feeling stressed, someone who might be lacking clarity in their lives, lacking that direction, feeling overwhelmed, feeling burnt out, just feeling stressed out. And you don't have to be working a corporate job to have any of those feelings. You might have friends that maybe they're staying at home with kids. You can very much have that feeling, staying at home with kids. Okay, this is normal human experience. So I guarantee Every one of us knows someone that's going to benefit from this information, and we don't know how that's going to impact and change their lives. So take a moment, shoot a text over with a link to this episode, share it with a friend, and be part of change in the world. Jess, again, thank you so much for joining us on The Conscious Investor.
It's been my honor, Julie. Thank you for having me.
That's great. And Conscious Investor, remember, adventure belongs on the trail. And it's really fun having someone who likes to be on the trail also. On the trail, not in our investing and not in our personal life. So if you need support in either capacity, make sure you reach out to me. You can text me directly. Yeah, me directly at 208-904-1938. So feel free, shoot me a message and I can send you information on investing or on mindset, whatever is going to support you most. Until next time, cheers to your health, your mindset, and your wealth.